playing, and the recording is running right now. So again, warm welcome to all of you. My name is Levi, or as in English, it would be Levi. I've heard practically every version out there. I'm the CEO at Dietmap, and together with my colleague Gerbrand, we're hosting this session for all of you today, where we're going to dive deeper into corporate volunteering, employer-supported volunteering, or ESV, or whatever you want to call it. And we're excited. So I see that some of you have opened up their camera. If you wish to do so, it's always nice to be able to look at some lovely faces. But please keep your microphone on mute throughout the session. But we can open up the floor if you want to go and ask a question. On the right below of the screen is the chat button. If you could open that up, and if everybody could introduce themselves in the chat, that would be lovely. And this is also the place where you would ask questions. So perhaps you will see a notification popping up where you see a chat message. So I'm looking forward to hear from all of you, where you're from, where you work, and what you're excited to learn today. So without further ado, let's dive into the session. Today is about ESV. And this session is aimed to help you take the next step, or perhaps even take your first step in ESV. Before this session, I looked at all of your websites just to get a feel on where you are in your journey with ESV. Some of them have already posted some information. But lots of you have also not posted any information. So we also figured that it would be best to cover the basics, but also specifically share some best practices for you to get inspired. We will also be looking at some of the trends, the benefits and challenges as we see them, because the challenges are very real and not to be underestimated if you want to decide to work together with companies and businesses. These experiences are based on our collaborations with 50 partners across Europe, across the world, who are all looking to engage more and more with businesses. So we organize this session for you to get inspired to learn and grow together, because there are so many great examples already happening within our sector, and it's a shame if that is kept within the region. So let's share them and with all of us together here. So with these impact examples and tips to help you grow, we don't want to stick around discussing challenges too much. We also want to look at the solutions for tomorrow. And that's basically what we've been doing at Dietmap since 2017. So we originally started out as the national volunteering platform for the Netherlands. So we've helped around 15,000 nonprofits recruit, retain, and match volunteers. It has been an amazing journey for us so far, especially during the height of the COVID pandemic, where we launched the Corona Helpers initiative. And we've seen around 3 million volunteers already being matched on our volunteer platforms. But we decided to go another route, and that is to work together with local infrastructure organizations, such as where most of you are also working, because that's where the magic happens, and that is where the true value is in supporting nonprofit organizations, in working with volunteers. So we're working with a lot of cool partners across the UK. I see that Deborah is here from Go for Hearts. Happy to see you. And also working with amazing partners in Gloucestershire, Norfolk, and we are steadily growing and setting up these partnerships. So we're happy to have you all here and share your learnings from where you are. This is also a team picture of us. We're with 9 people, amazing people, each in their own regards. This is a recent trip that we've had in Belgium, because we were a fully remote team, and it was great to see each other. The example in the middle is an example of a charity that we work with. So we do not only supply our volunteer platforms to infrastructure organizations, but we also work directly with charities, with companies, and trying to get them together to work together in the ecosystem. So also to provide a little bit of context where we are right now within the sector, I guess that most of you have a keen sense of where we are, and that is that it's not the easiest of times. So we see inflation across the continent. We see the cost of living crisis, polarization, increased pressure on service delivery, also all challenges that are very real and not to be underestimated. So we try to work together with our partners to see how we can find solutions for the long term. If we look at ESV specifically and look within the private sector, each company has their own respective challenges. From trying to keep employees in, to retain them, but also having to meet new standards of sustainability and increased expectations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have to do something with climate change. They have to battle inequality. So they're also trying to figure out what is our place and how do we view in this context volunteering. Overall, we see that there's a growing need, but also a growing opportunity for people and businesses to create and sustain meaningful and positive impact in the world. But would I say that ESV is already changing society on a large scale? I wouldn't say that it is yet, but I'm still hopeful that this, towards the future, will play an even bigger role than it is playing right now. So diving deeper into ESV, or employer-supported volunteering, in a sense, it's where businesses or companies provide opportunities for employees to volunteer during work time, sometimes part of a bigger program, like a professional setup program that's part of corporate social responsibility, or standalone one-off projects for them to get started with this. Most companies already have a sort of program set up where they provide employees with hours to volunteer. On average, we see it's between 8 and 16 hours a year. So it's not that much, but we've also seen excesses up to 5 to 10 days even for some of the bigger companies who truly value these volunteering hours. So it's getting there. So things are changing across the board. If we think about ESV and types of activities, it's mainly the team volunteering days that we see, the impact days or team building activities. That's the first thing that I thought of when I first got acquainted with ESV, and it's one of the biggest, most done activities across the sector. This is an example of our own team activity that we've done. This was a little over a month ago. Gerbrand and I, we joined a neighborhood lunch in the Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam. We had a lovely time. So it was a get together for people who live in the neighborhood to meet each other, have a dance, have a bite to eat. So we registered as volunteers. We went there and they said, well, set up 250 chairs and tables. We were like, let's go, let's do this. It was incredibly rewarding, especially since we saw all the happy faces for people that truly enjoyed and having a lovely afternoon. The great thing about this team activity is that it's clear what to do. It's easy to set up, and it's where hands-on help is needed the most. So we've seen with many businesses that they're trying to set up these specific impact days where they welcome large teams or big groups to engage with volunteering activities. But if you look a little bit further than that, you also see more companies trying to supply their skills, knowledge, and expertise to nonprofits, pro bono projects where a marketing agency or marketing team sets up helps set up a recruitment campaign, or they refresh the website, or where companies supply trustees with specific expertise to nonprofits. So we see that is becoming a bigger thing, and I'm happy to see that. You also see that, for example, customer contact, customer service employees taking up a role of more of a mentor or a buddy system or coaching system, where they connect very well with young people, even if they are working remotely, so they don't have to ever meet in person. So these are all sorts of activities that you can also think about when trying to set up these collaborations. Another thing we've seen are community conversations, where a company takes up the role of organizing specific events where people can meet up, since they have an expertise in organizing such events. And of course, we also see the fundraisers or goods collections whenever there's a need for that. So it's a lot more than just these team activity days, but we also recognize that this is always the first thing that most companies ask for when they reach out and want to get started with ESV. And it's also one of the challenges we see, because it's a difficult thing to set up easily. We've also identified some trends that we see, and in this case, trends is what we see that is really important this year and will be so the coming year. So social responsibility is increasingly becoming the new business norm. All companies are trying to figure out, how do we give back and engage with our community? But if you look at the objectives behind it, those are mainly internalized. So it's much more about, how can we become a interesting employer for new people joining us, or for recruitment purposes, or it's part of HR, where they see ESV as part of professional skills development. And this is something that we see that needs to align a lot more with the objectives that are more externalized, and that is making a positive impact in the world. We also see that even though ESV has been around since the 70s, more companies are building professional volunteering schemes as part of their overall CSR strategies. So getting volunteering hours is almost a no-brainer anymore if you decide to go this route. And there is also an increasing amount of employees who supply their employer with new ideas, with existing connections that they already have, and wanting to connect what they are already doing in the private time. They want to connect it and do it under the banner of their employer. We also see that technology has played a major part in the last 10 years, ever since social media came up, where things could be shared more easily. Also digital brokerage, online communities, virtual volunteering or micro volunteering, but also better ways to measure and share impact with all stakeholders involved, including stakeholders at companies, because they increasingly want to know, what is the impact that we're making, and how can we also share that with the world. Then lastly, this is the example that I mentioned with pro bono activity. Skills-based volunteering is on the rise, but as I said, it is still mainly hands-on volunteering for the most part. Please forgive me if I speed through it, but this is so. Feel free to ask any questions or share your insights in the chat if you want to. So, what have we been hearing in the last year or so? And probably this is also similar to what you've been hearing working at an infrastructure organization. So we get these calls or emails from companies say, please connect us to nonprofits in these specific areas for these specific topics because we want to work together and then want to tap into our network. Or even more detailed, we're looking for something to do on Tuesday night for like around 21 people. Oh, and it would also be great if it's something to do with food or even working with homeless people. So do you have anything? And we've tried to set that up. And we've also seen firsthand how difficult it is because it's so far away from the reality and the need from nonprofits. So it's setting up something like this is not easily done, and it's not in my ID something that is sustainable in the long term. On the other hand, once companies start doing employee supported volunteering, we've also heard responses from, hey, this was a great experience. I'm glad that we've done this, and we want to look beyond just one impact day, and we are aiming for long-term sustainable partnerships and how to collaborate more extensively, also beyond volunteering per se. So there are connections being made, and I think that's also great to see across the board. I'm not going to go through all of these benefits and challenges because most of them are probably already familiar. But I want to zoom in on the only Dutch phrase that you see. So this is a small Dutch course for all of you. Vrijwillig, maar niet vrijblijvend. It's a famous saying here in the voluntary sector, and it means that volunteering is voluntarily, but it is not without any obligations. So companies need to understand that even though they have a bunch of volunteers ready to go, it's not as easy to set this up. And it requires a lot of investment, a lot of time, effort, and sometimes even funds to set things up like this. So this is still a big challenge that we've seen in ESV, that companies don't connect that well to the reality of nonprofits. And that is where connecting these needs and wishes needs to happen more often. And this is also where you working as with an infrastructure organizations come in to facilitate these partnerships, to manage the right expectations, to keep track of, do we have the right volunteers for the right job? How do we take different unique profiles and skills and personal drives of volunteers into account to make sure that we facilitate the best match out there. So keep these in mind when you're doing this. Quickly looking at the time, we're pretty well on schedule. This is another team activity that we've done. It seems like we do a lot of volunteering, but honestly, this is the second one we've done. So I only have the two examples to show. But this was another experience that we've had at the coffee house in Amsterdam. It's where they provide homeless people with breakfast, lunch, and they also work on greenery projects within the neighborhood for which they get paid. And this is how they also take up their rightful place in society. And they work together with companies who can join. They just have to buy the groceries, and cook lunch for 30 people. And this is the best way, because this is really a one-off opportunity, but you can also have this as a recurring activity where you just fill up the schedule with new companies that are lining up to send over their team. Well, Gerbrand and Lioba in the picture, they are smiling right now. But since I was the head chef and I decided to cook a recipe from my grandma, which took a lot of effort, I was really drilling them because I have never cooked for 30 people in my life. So, but it was great to see that we came together as a team and having these conversations with these people. And this is on the picture on the left is Roel. Roel manages the coffee house. It's an amazing guy. And he sat down for an interview and he said, well, if for a company volunteer, this is the first thing they do when they engage with volunteering activities, they are oftentimes shocked because this is just a totally new world for them. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what they're getting into. So this was a kind of an amazing insight because we felt exactly the same, even when we are working with voluntary organizations for years on end. And this is something also learning for us, get these firsthand experiences and to know what we're talking about. I see a question from Mira. How much do companies charge for the team building activity? How much, or perhaps how much should we charge? It really depends on the activity. Some charities have a very well thought out activity already laying around, as with the coffee house. They say, well, you just need to bring lunch for 30 people. You need to be here at 11. Lunch should be ready at 1. After that, we expect you to engage with everybody there until 3. And the only out-of-pocket cost they have is to supply the lunch. So oftentimes this doesn't even scare off companies, but there are examples where even with nonprofits charging companies, it is still too much work to set up, to facilitate an activity for 10 to 15 people, prepping everything, making sure that everybody is briefed. So in a sense, team activities for large groups are not always the best fit. So that's why we also encourage our partners and our nonprofit partners to think about other means and other ways to work together and to get the value out of volunteering. Now, this is where you come in as mainly as an infrastructure organization. I'm guessing that you get these questions a lot from local companies and that you have to figure out what kind of service you would want to provide to these companies, matching them with local nonprofits. And the same goes for you. Everybody is under pressure, understaffed, not always equipped with the best expertise to do so. But that is why I also always extremely value the creativity that I've seen in the sector to get these partnerships up and running. And that is truly amazing. Let me read the comment from Cindy real quick. A lot of preparation and management required. Of course, yeah. Yeah, this is a great example, and this is a great explanation. Thanks, Whitney, for this. And this is Cindy, sorry, something that everybody should take into account, also in terms of managing these expectations when you do so. But I wanted to show some examples of the partners that we've been working with in how to set up these types of services. What can you do in order to provide and make the best match out there? So one example is Volunteer The Hague. It's the volunteer organization that or the volunteer center in The Hague that is specifically aimed at English-speaking people who live and work in the neighborhood. So they always set up their yearly volunteer job fair, not specifically focused per se on companies, but as most of these expats that work there are part of a company, this is also a great way for them to grow these connections with local businesses. Another example, and this was great. We always try to visit these events as much as possible. This is Tatiana. She's amazing. She's an amazing event coordinator also, and this is where they match nonprofit organizations with local expats that are trying to engage with volunteering for the first time. But these volunteer job fairs are pretty common across the board. But what I especially like about this example is where they also try to showcase expertise with guest speakers. This is where they try to create these long lasting collaborations with companies in the neighborhood, because usually they also don't have a clue on where to go. So their mix and match event is something to get inspired by. Another example that I've seen, another Hannah, is that Hannah Reed from Community Action Suffolk. It's pretty great. They organize these employee-supported volunteering taster days. It's where they select specific nonprofits, where they come up with an entire day for companies and teams and people just to get a taste first of what it is like to do volunteering. And I think this is also an example to welcome people, make it as accessible as possible, and try to see if you can collaborate more extensively afterwards. So we'll also be sharing the links afterwards, so you can have a look on how they actually set this up. But I don't know Hannah personally, but I wanted to reach out to her just to say how amazing of an idea I found this, because it's very low threshold and easy to engage with. Next to, of course, the volunteer fairs and taster days, you have the information that most of you also already provide on your website. What is ESV about? What can I expect? Which roles or activities are suitable for groups? So our partner, Volunteering Norfolk, they provide this page on the website where they explain more about what it is, what the benefits are, and how businesses can get started if they are looking for activities. And this is where they try to connect early on, capture that intent, and set up these collaborations. And what I like is that they have specifically curated activities already ready to go for most businesses. Another example is a partner in Somerset, Spark Change. They have amazing success stories on their website where they interview companies and ask them about their experiences. The setup of these success stories is amazing because it shows what they've done, what they can get out of it, what they did, what the impact was, and they also got a response from the company. And it said, I especially like where they said the best thing was that we could see the project through in one day. So they left with a real sense of achievement. They had to clear a path and within the forest, and that was amazing. I visited Arcade Agwood last year myself, and it's truly inspiring to see how they can easily set up new activities for each and every different type of company volunteer that they work with. So head over to those success stories to get a feel. I've looked across the sector, across almost 200 plus CVS organizations, volunteer centers, you name it. Around 30% of you provide information on what ESV is about, what companies can expect, and how to get started with it. So it's not a lot yet. And almost 5% of what I saw was that have formed like a dedicated program or project to support ESV. Then, lastly, this is an example case that we are doing, a project that we're doing in the city of Amsterdam. It's where we provided a place for a volunteer platform for companies, hundreds of companies in the Amsterdam region, where they have access to curated activities already lined up. And just for employees, to engage with these activities on a one-off basis. Like, hey, I have some time, I have some free time, I want to do this together with a colleague. Let me just sign up and get things going. So this is also an amazing example of how you can make it accessible for companies to get started and try to see if you can um, increase the collaboration afterwards. We've been running this project for over a year now, and what we've learned from this experience in working with these companies, trying to match them together with nonprofits, is that you really have to experience it firsthand to truly learn about the difference between what we call regular volunteers are in regards to company volunteers, different expectations, different motivations. Uh, it's much more about quality rather than quantity, like amount of people helped or amount of volunteer hours, but be ready to report on that impact because most companies want to know what it is that they've achieved, even though it's still difficult to really put a number on that. It's where you should balance investment and effort with the impact made. So sometimes for some nonprofits, it's just not a great fit to work together with companies. And that is also the reality that is sometimes true. Well, we thought, oh, we'll just supply these activities ready to go. Companies can sign up, people can sign up very easily, but it still requires heaps of support from experts like you to make it meaningful and lasting. So if we want to make this work, I'm also looking at you to make this a success. But I'm extremely happy with all of the amazing examples that I've seen in the sector. And I truly believe that infrastructure organizations are still the most important bridge builders between the private and public sector. But I'm also hoping to like get a response. Like, is there one of you that is already working with this successfully? If you have an example, feel free to share that within in the chat. But I also want to hand it over to my colleague Gerbrand, who in a bit will also share some of the tips for all of you to get started or take a fresh look at your program to see if there's still something to learn. So I suggest we'll take a quick break, like 5 minutes or so, and then we'll see you back again after that. There's a neat be right back button below, which is very cool to try out. It's quite cool, right? All right, see you back in a bit.
All right. Guess we're waiting for the last people to return from their be right back button, which is a feature that I absolutely love about this app. All right. I guess we can get it started. Very nice to meet you today. My name is Gerbrand Holland. I'm a growth manager at DeepMap. And yeah, I would like to, get you through getting started with employer-supported volunteering in 5 steps. So ultimately, to get started with employer-supported volunteering in your region, I think the first step should be to identify the community needs and volunteer interest in your region. So start by conducting a needs assessment within your community to understand specific social or environmental issues that might require corporate support. Simultaneously, you should contact and identify the interest and skills of potential corporate volunteers. Why is this important? Because, well, this first step actually lays the foundation for matching companies with the relevant causes that align with their values and employee skills, and that also, and that also works vice versa. So the next step would be to promote your services and opportunities. So you have to add a dedicated page on your website. So you know the community needs and volunteer interests. I think a logical next step would be to actually create a page on your website. This can create intention, and it should at least include some of these components. So explain what is employer-supported volunteering, and also give a call to action to get started immediately. Explain the benefits that there are for companies, but also for social organizations. It's not only companies you want to attract, you also want to connect with social organizations. So the third part that should also be included is what specifically is your role in facilitating the perfect match. So that people who visit your website actually know what is your role in this connection. Fourth one, always important, storytelling. Success stories, videos, the more the better. Show that you know what you're doing and that people enjoy it. Fifth is a database of activities and organizations, if possible. So the more, the merrier. Of course, add a contact form so people can contact you, and optionally add an FAQ. Then on to the first step. You have to develop a database of voluntary organizations, their activities, and companies. So when you create this database in your region, you should categorize this database on, for example, the mission, the needs, but also available volunteering opportunities. And similarly, you should build a database of companies that are interested in corporate volunteering. And this database itself can then serve as a resource to make those matches and, based on the shared objective and goals that you actually put into this database. And of course, you should always update this database the bigger it gets. So naturally, you know your voluntary organizations already. But to get into contact with companies, you could, for example, visit networking events, business associations, the Rotary, for example, or you could contact companies directly by going through a list of SMEs or companies in your region, which is available on gov.uk if you want it. The fourth step is to facilitate actual meaningful connections. I have some ideas for this, so hear me out. First one is promoting self-service. So it's the easiest way of facilitating ESV. So you showcase your database of opportunities and companies and let them make the match themselves. This way, you let companies react to the volunteering opportunities. And optionally, you could also voluntary organizations could contact companies directly. However, you could also opt for a more personal approach, so personal matching. So you match companies based on the preference that you already assessed in step 1 and documented in step 3. And you organize introductory meetings and tailor the match to the specific strengths and resources of both the company and the voluntary organization. Make sure that the match you make is actually aligned to the broader community need that you already assessed in step 1. That way you facilitate the most social impact, and you can also make a case for the social impact to both companies and social organizations. A third idea I had was to organize volunteer fairs. So specifically targeting to facilitate a match between organizations and companies and voluntary organizations. We have a nice concept in the Netherlands. We call it the trading floor. And voluntary organizations there have a small booth or a table in which they can ask specific help requests, such as donations, group work, or skills-based volunteering opportunities. I need somebody to shoot a video for my organization, for example. Companies, they send their representatives to offer their help, and they make an agreement on the spot. There's also a solicitor there, and he or she estimates the value of this match, and this adds up to a monetary or social value. This is then communicated to the outside world, and so you put social and monetary value on a day itself. So great for publicity as well. Last step would be to monitor, evaluate, and foster the long-term engagement. So you should continuously monitor, evaluate the progress, collect feedback, collect stories, shoot your videos, and encourage ongoing communication and collaboration. So regularly check in, monitor, and see what you can improve. Then I want to end with some small tips and tricks for both, preparing nonprofits and companies. So let's start with the nonprofits. I think there are 3 parts to to facilitate ESV for nonprofits. They should first prepare their organization. They should determine their value and be able to communicate their value to companies. So specifically what a partnership means in social value to your organization and to the company. They should plan and prepare every opportunity properly, because it's often a one-off. That's the reality. They have to make a good impression for a longer partnership. Also, have a recognition and appreciation method in place. For example, when we volunteered at the coffee house, we got a very nice mug and their own branded coffee. And we're still using this mug to this day, and that's just a lovely reminder. Recognition could also be mention the company in a social post. Make sure that they share these social posts, so you also show your gratitude to the outside world. And also make sure to be able to manage the logistics and coordination. Nothing hinders a long-term partnership more than an ill-prepared activity. When there's people just standing around doing nothing, that isn't a good image to the outside. And last, define your needs and dare to ask. This is actually what Mira also said. How much could we charge companies? You need to dare to ask. Voluntary organizations are often way too passive to ask what they actually need. And when you need to ask, when you need something, ask it in your posting and make agreements beforehand. Ask for donations, reimbursements when you have to plan an opportunity, and communicate that to the company. Paramount. Second step is offering the right kind of opportunities, and we want to say look beyond the team activity. Look at skills-based volunteering, mentorship programs, or customized opportunities to accommodate their needs. And we will send 15 examples of corporate volunteering activities along in our next communication. And the last step is know where to find corporate volunteers, and this is where you come in. Make sure you have this database available. Make sure you communicate. You will be the place where corporate volunteers can be found. Well, last tips for companies. They have to connect to nonprofit deeds. To nonprofit needs. They have to accept that volunteering isn't free. That is something that they have to be taught. It should be common knowledge that facilitating volunteering opportunities often requires manpower, tools, guidance. These aren't always free. So be creative and, dare to ask once again. Embed ESV in your culture, so make it part of your onboarding. When companies want to start their ESV journey, they should make sure that it should become part of their culture. So get the employees while they're fresh. Make it part of the onboarding. Make sure that it becomes regular, that they know that it's possible. Make sure they make use of their opportunities. And when the new employees do it, when they stay for longer, they will also give that through to the next set of employees. And last, make employees own their projects. So put your employees in charge, make them and let them make their own volunteering journey. Companies are brimming with professionally skilled people, and each enterprise employs people with years of experience working various roles, from project management to HR to software development. Have some faith in your employees and make sure that they connect with organizations they want to connect with and that they feel comfortable in. Instead of imposing it from the top down, they should be built from bottom up and then actually also been taken by the top of the company. So those are my practical tips for nonprofits, companies, and my 5 ways to get started. And I really want to open the floor to questions right now, or remarks, or a good group discussion.
Well, thank you so much sharing your insights. This also, like I have mentioned, this is also the moment to ask your questions. You can do it in the chat, or you can open up your mic if you have any questions to ask. It's always scary to jump to the stage, but this is the opportunity to learn together. Mira, they're getting more requests from companies for mentoring young people. Yeah, that is a great example of not all activities are well suited for company volunteers, especially mentoring roles. So let's say a company volunteer gets 8 hours a year to volunteer within work time, and filling up a mentoring role requires much more time from that end. So it's quite difficult to find the right match in that sense, to set up a more personal role, as in mentoring young people, where a lot more is required than just 8 hours. So this is also something where companies should be aware of the fact that most of it could also be that they introduce their employees within work time to these types of volunteering opportunities, but they have to consider the fact that they should do this volunteering also partly in their private time. And this is also where it kind of the challenge sometimes lies, because most companies don't want to provide these opportunities if they cannot count these volunteering hours per se. So it's a difficult one. The biggest challenge with companies, we've been working with some of them, mainly bigger companies that want to engage. The biggest challenge we've seen is they don't have the network of nonprofits. They don't have these existing connections, let alone know and understand their specific needs. They have difficulty to engage staff. even though they provide these hours, we still see that participation numbers are as low as 10% of the entire workforce. We also see that it's difficult if to re-engage volunteers, because you wouldn't believe it, but company volunteers are also people, and they're also struggling with just with the daily life. In some cases, they don't have that much time on their hands. They don't have the focus sometimes, so it's difficult to commit themselves to volunteering in the broader scheme. So it helps that they get these volunteering hours, but it's still a challenge for companies to facilitate this in their right way. Also, ESV is always a minor part, or usually a minor part, of the overall corporate sustainability strategy. So it's the activity that requires the most investment in time and effort from their end, because it's much easier for them just to throw around funding, so to say, and say, well, this is how we take up social responsibility. So it is increasingly, for some companies, it's difficult to showcase the true value of these of ESV in this case. So these are some of the biggest challenges companies face. Yeah. Right. Yes.
Thank you, Levi. I think you and your branch have come up with really good examples of the steps what we need to think about. I also wanted to add a point that just as the companies have got to invest more time and effort, vice versa as for the charities and infrastructure organizations like ourselves, who are like we've got very limited funding, we don't have the resources, the capacity. So you have given us some very good examples of how curated activities, mix and match. These are some great examples. In your experience, did these charities or did these organizations get the funding to run these activities, or did they get some funding from the corporates to deliver these activities? Is my question.
Yeah, it's usually a combination between all of them, and we've seen in this case with these mix and match events. The best thing about these types of events is that they welcome companies that are already committed to ESV. So they already know beforehand most of the time that they want to invest time. They have funding readily available. They also match with nonprofits that are open for specific company volunteers and know beforehand that they should come up with different types of activities for them to get started. But the true value lies in what happens after that, and that is the capability of nonprofits to look beyond a team activity day and look at different ways of, for example, funding, to set this up in a more structural way. So we also see volunteering as a first step towards a broader collaboration, and I guess that's where also the infrastructure organization's role kind of decreases a little bit once these conversations start happening more regularly. But we're gonna share some examples afterwards for also specific activities that you can also tap into. And always happy to provide more info afterwards. So 1 minute to 12. So we want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're going to share slides and the recording with all of you afterwards. We're always open for a chat. So if you have specific questions, reach out, let us know, and happy to learn and grow together. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is very informative. Thank you again.
Thank you. All right. Until the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.